For the 7th change, we're going to be going into the means of egress changes. And we're going to look at a new requirement for the remoteness of exit stairway enclosures. Now, IBC 2006, as in previous codes, provided separation requirements for exits and exit access doorways in section 1015.2.1. And this is the basic separation requirement where for two exit or exit access doorways, there's a certain minimum distance that must be provided. But however, the distance is measured in a straight line between exit doors and exit access doorways. And in an exception here that I just included, for example, if there's a 1-hour fire-rated corridor, the distance is measured along the shortest direct line of travel within the corridor. Now what this means is that basically separation requirements in the code did not guarantee remoteness of exit stairway enclosures. And I'm going to demonstrate this, illustrate this with an illustration. Here we have a building where the two exits are separated. I mean, there's a 1-hour fire resistance rated corridor connecting the exit. So according to the separation requirements, the distance must be measured along the shortest direct line of travel within the corridor. And according to the code, half of the length of the maximum overall diagonal dimension across the building, half of that length must be provided for the direct line of travel. Now, since we're measuring the direct line of travel, we're not really controlling the distance, the remoteness between the staircases. So, in order to address this, a change was made for high-rise buildings. So let's take a look what that change was. In IBC 2009, we've searched high-rise stairway. And I'm going to go to view all matches here. And the top match is high-rise building. So let's take a look. Scrolling down, I see a new requirement in 403.5.1 under means of egress. And that's remoteness of exit stairway enclosures. Basically, it's telling us that the required exit enclosure shall be separated by a distance of not less than 30 feet or not less than 1/4 of the length of the maximum overall diagonal dimension. However, the important thing here is that the distance must be measured in a straight line between the nearest points of the exit stairway enclosure. So now we're not anymore, this is a remoteness requirement, not separation. We're not measuring from door to door or along the travel distance. We're measuring in a straight line between the nearest points of the enclosure. So this change is basically trying to ensure a remoteness between enclosures in case of blasts to stairways where both stairways could get affected and made incapable to be used. So going back to our summary, we're going to have an illustration here. So according to the new requirement for high-rise buildings, the distance, there's also now a remoteness requirement, and the distance for this requirement must be measured in the shortest distance between the enclosures, as shown in the illustration. And this must be minimum 30 feet or 1/4 of the maximum overall diagonal dimension, and whichever one is less. Continuing on to the 8th change, we're going to be looking into the additional exit stairway requirement for high-rise buildings. In IBC 2006, there were no requirements for additional exit stairways in high-rise buildings. And there was a concern that during a fire where full evacuation is required, the egress capacity could be reduced by firefighters using one of the stairways. So a new requirement to ensure sufficient egress capacity is maintained in significantly tall buildings. Full evacuation takes a longer time was added. So this change was made basically trying to address the long evacuation time it takes in significantly tall buildings. So let's take a look at the change by searching additional stairway. I'm going to click on IBC 2009, with 24 matches for additional stairway. And I'm going to go to, let's go to Chapter 4 in high-rise buildings. And as we scroll down, we see additional exit stairway requirement, a new section. And here it says for buildings other than Group R2 that are more than 420 feet in building height, one additional exit stairway, meter requirements of a section, so forth, are required in addition to the minimum number of exits required by section 1021.1. So again, let's go back to our summary. So we have the minimum number of exits required by section 1021.1 and the new added requirement to provide one additional exit stairway only in buildings more than 420 feet in building height. The exceptions are Group R2 occupancy buildings, where it's a low risk fire occupancy, and also buildings equipped with occupant self-evacuation elevators. So again, these two exceptions do not require the additional exit stairway even in buildings more than 420 feet in height. And coming on to our final change, we're going to look at the luminous egress path marking requirements in IBC 2009. In 2006 version of the IBC, there were no requirements for the luminous egress path markings. And a change was made in order to decrease the egress and full building evacuation time. So let's take a look at the code to see what it tells us. We're searching for luminous markings, and IBC here has 5 matches. And again, going to Chapter 4, Section 403, we're going to scroll down to see the highlighted, and we see a new section, luminous egress path markings. And it says, luminous markings shall be provided in accordance with Section 1024. So let's take a look by clicking on that section. And this is a new section in IBC 2009, and it tells us general scoping requirements that luminous egress path markings must be provided in buildings of groups A, B, E, I, M, and R1 in high-rise buildings, basically saying having an occupied floor located more than 75 feet above. So it's defining the high-rise buildings here. So in certain groups in high-rise buildings, we have to provide the luminous egress path markings. And the section outlines, detailed requirements, which we're going to summarize very briefly. So we're saying that approved luminous markings must be provided in high-rise buildings of groups A, B, E, I, M, and R1. And if you go to section 1024, it establishes the requirements for steps, landings, handrails, perimeter demarcation lines, obstacles, and doors in exit enclosures. There is also information about uniformity, the material that must be used, and the illumination capacity. So this covers all 9 changes that we've done for the related changes in high-rise buildings in IBC 2009. I'd like to thank everyone for their time. We have just passed the 30-minute mark. We appreciate your feedback.